Hey, it's Hunt. You found Hunt on Saints. We're talking black and gold football. Do us a favor. Hit the like button, share your comments below, and hit that subscription button so you can get all of our content. Enjoy. Desmond Ridder started the season as the starting quarterback. What did he do well in his time as the starter to begin the season?
Well, okay, so first of all, he's very good with his zone read. That's led to 4 rushing touchdowns this year. And part of that, too, is that you have 2 very talented backs in Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, who will force defense's attention, and maybe teams won't focus as much on Desmond Ridder in the zone read. So he keeps it and goes and scores touchdowns. And it would have been 5 touchdowns except for the fumble in Tampa Bay, which is one of the issues with Desmond Ridder, which was the turnovers. Now, obviously, the Falcons are hoping those turnovers, we're talking 6 interceptions, 6 fumbles lost, will get remedied, and that's just a young quarterback kind of overthinking and just making mistakes, you know? But when Desmond Ridder was playing, you saw some level of improvement, we'll call it, in terms of the passing game, in terms of his reads, in terms of making good decisions, in terms of pushing the ball into intermediate and deep spaces down the field. That was something in week 1, week 2, didn't really see much of, but really until he got benched, you were starting to see more of it. The reason he was benched was not because he was being timid or because they were not happy with maybe his completion percentage. That's not the case at all. He was benched for a multitude of factors largely surrounding the turnovers, and I would go even further and say the fumbles because he's just the interceptions are what they are in terms of having 6 of them, and 3 of them came in one game, and you went from there.
So as far as the offense goes, I've seen a lot of chatter about Bijan Robinson kind of from the outside and his involvement in the offense. Where are the Falcons with their rookie tailback?
Yeah, all right. I mean, I can go on. How many seconds do we have?
We got 1, but we still got like 8 minutes left, so fire away. I'm curious.
Okay. Do not buy into the Bijan. By the way, it's Bijan. His mom is this Bijan. Bijan says he doesn't care, so it becomes a completely kind of nebulous how you address him as Bijan or Bijan. He will answer to both. But the thing is, with his usage, people are just focused in a fantasy football world, and they're focused in a red zone touchdown world. Bijan Robinson leads the Falcons in touches, and that is even with a game where he only had 1 touch due to illness and headache. He was going into the bye leading the NFL in at least among running backs in routes run. And he's been a very productive back. We're talking about a guy that's still probably going to have somewhere between 1,500 and 1,700 all-purpose yards this year as long as he stays healthy the rest of the way. The one kind of issue was touchdowns and his touches in the red zone. Now, the Falcons gave him touches in the red zone against Arizona. He scored a touchdown against Arizona. But they were really also trying to ramp him up instead of running him out there and burning him out at the start of the season because he hasn't played a season like this before. And we hear that from every coach and every team all across the league when they're talking about rookies and working them in. But the Falcons had a very clear plan with Bijan Robinson, but it wasn't that he wasn't being used. It's just he wasn't being used the way that maybe people expected him to be, although if you had listened to the Falcons coaches from when they drafted him, they said he's not just a running back. He's an offensive option for us. He's an offensive, you can move him everywhere, and that's what they've done. They've used him out of the backfield. He's lined up in the slot. He's lined up outside. He's run a ton of routes. He's essentially their slot receiver, and he's one of their 2 key running backs along with Tyler Algier. That's how he's used. It's just not necessarily the way certain people think or wanted him to be used.
Makes a lot of sense. And look, I can't claim to have watched every snap the Falcons have played this year, but when he gets 1 touch in a game, that comes out on Twitter all over the place, and the red zone stuff was fairly well documented as well. So very well said, Michael. Appreciate that being cleared up. Michael Rothstein is our guest, ESPN reporter covering the Atlanta Falcons, Saints and Falcons coming up on Sunday from the ATL. Defensively, the last 3 weeks haven't looked great on paper. Where would you say the strength of this Falcons defense lies?
Well, they haven't looked great in real life either, man.
Yeah.
Paper, real life, take your pick, has not looked good. The loss of Grady Jarrett in the middle of that defensive front has been a bigger problem than I think you could have even imagined. And you couldn't have imagined it necessarily because Grady Jarrett had been so healthy throughout his career. But what he did was he distracted so much attention that freed up David Ominyata, obviously Saints fans are familiar with, freed up Calais Campbell, freed up some of their edge rushers. It allowed them to do a lot and be stout against the run as well. The strength of this team is very much in its secondary. Richie Grant has not played particularly well of late, but Jesse Bates is one of the best safeties in the NFL. Falcons paid him like that in the offseason, and A.J. Terrell and Jeff Okudah are one of the better young tandems of cornerbacks in the NFL. Jeff Okudah, specifically the former number 3 overall pick back when he was in Detroit, is having a renaissance season. He has been quite good all year long. And that has been where I think the defense has had its strength. Now, all of that said, the last 3 weeks have been pretty rough. And they need to figure out a way to make up for Grady Jarrett's loss. And they also lost Troy Anderson, although that was early in the season. He was replaced well by Nate Landman. But they lost Troy Anderson, who is a great sideline-to-sideline linebacker and a pretty good downhill linebacker as well, and could cover. And that has forced them to do a little alteration as well. They handled that well. But Grady Jarrett is a massive piece to this defense, and it'll be very curious to see what this looks like now that they've had a week to kind of sit back and say, how do you handle this after having to go back to back to back, just kind of surviving and, frankly, dealing with mobile quarterbacks in Kyler Murray in his first start back, Josh Dobbs after Jaren Hall got hurt, and Will Levis. And specifically with that, Jaren Hall, Josh Dobbs, completely different quarterbacks. They couldn't have prepared for what Josh Dobbs would have looked like in that Minnesota offense because I don't think Minnesota knew what Josh Dobbs was going to look like in that Minnesota offense, considering he hadn't taken a single snap with the team at that point.
So kind of a big picture question here, Michael. With the Ryan and Breeze battles over that decade, there were a lot of 10-11 win teams going against each other, high stakes. The rivalry was heated, and that's all great. First place still is kind of on the line this weekend, but we're talking about a Falcons team that's lost 3 in a row, 4 of 5, and a Saints team that's middling around 500 again, and there's just not a real lot of buzz in the city just about the Saints. So, what kind of environment do you expect on Sunday, and what's the feeling in the fan base about where the organization is headed?
Oh, man. I don't know what to expect on Sunday.
Yeah.
I could see not an empty stadium, but I could see a stadium that doesn't have a ton of people in it. And I think if it was any team other than the Saints, you might see that. I could see a stadium that has a lot of Saints fans that show up. I think you could see a stadium that's split 50-50. The one thing I don't think you'll see necessarily is a stadium full of Falcons fans because I've been covering this team over 2 years now. I have not seen that yet.
Okay.
There have been times where they have gotten very loud, but it has not been with any level of consistency. And as you said, they're 4-6. There's not a ton of hype or buzz around this team right now. If anything, there's more criticism than anything else. It'll be really curious to see how the Falcons handle that atmosphere early on. To me, they need, in order to kind of get the fan base back going a little bit, Desmond Ridder needs to play well early. If Desmond Ridder does not play well early, if fans are not happy with some of the play calling early, it can get really. I'm very curious to see how that will play in Mercedes-Benz Stadium on Sunday because the fan base, at least part of the fan base, the vocal part of the fan base, seems very frustrated. But I think you could say that about, 30 of the NFL's 32 teams. That the vocal part of the fan base is going to be frustrated. So I don't read totally into that. But those are also very often the people that go to games too.
For sure, and I think that just these 4 teams in the South, I don't think that any of their fan bases are just fired up about where things are headed. I certainly know that is the case here in New Orleans, that people were just kind of bored with the whole thing and disappointed in a lot of what's going on, and it just feels like that's the case in all 4 spots. I mean, you're going to these venues. I mean, am I way off base here?
No, you're not. I mean, you're really not. Listen, to me, all 4 teams going into the season had major question marks. All of them at quarterback. Every team had a question at quarterback, and some had questions other places. And I think what we're seeing is all these teams still have major question marks, right? I don't think many people necessarily think Baker Mayfield's the answer in Tampa. Derek Carr's been up and down. He's looked really good at points, but there are other issues with the Saints team. Atlanta, I'm not ready to walk away from Desmond Ridder yet, but these next 7 games are going to tell you a heck of a lot about Desmond Ridder and maybe the future of where this Falcons team is going to be. And then Carolina, I mean, man, that team's just one of the worst in the NFL right now. And I mean, you go. Listen. I covered the Detroit Lions, who are now one of the best teams in the NFL, for many years, and there were many seasons like this in Detroit. And the difference to me is that Lions fans almost always showed up. And I think in some of the other stadiums, you're not necessarily seeing that if the team isn't doing well. And the Falcons went up to Detroit earlier this year, and I thought I'd heard it loud before because they had some really big moments when I was covering that team, even though it was not consistent. And I'll tell you, man, that place. You see what it is when that team is good, and I think we've seen it in the Superdome when the Saints are good, right? We haven't really seen it at Mercedes-Benz Stadium because other than 2017, they have not been. So I'm very curious to see what will happen if some of these teams get good, what this fan bases are like then, because right now, at least across the NFC South, we're seeing that it's a lot of money to go to an NFL game, right? It's a lot of money. So I don't know. I mean, I live in the mantra of if it doesn't bring you joy, why do it? And especially if it's not something that's bringing you money, right? So that's a question that if fan bases probably are asking themselves, or individual fans are like, do I want to spend the money to go to this game if I'm not happy with what I see? That's a fair question.
It sure is, and we'll see what happens on Sunday. All that said, first place in the South is on the line. Michael Rothstein.
And that's the thing. That's what could make this place really loud and really interesting is because it is the Saints and first place is on the line, and I think people will recognize that.
We'll certainly see.
I don't know.
Yeah, Michael, we appreciate the time, man. Happy Thanksgiving.
Take care. Bye.
Hey, it's on. Thanks for watching Hunt on Saints. Before you leave, help us out a little bit. Hit that like button. Leave your comments in the section below, and hit that subscribe button so you get all our content right here from Hunt on Saints. We'll see you next time.